The N64, home to some of the most iconic games ever made. If you had one, chances are you spent countless hours with the classics like Super Mario 64, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, GoldenEye 007, and of course Mario Kart 64. These games defined a generation, and even today they're the first titles people think of when reminiscing about the console, or even about Nintendo in general. But what about the more unknown games? While the N64 didn't have the largest library, it had some truly unique games that flew under the radar. Games that still hold up surprisingly well today. So in this video, we're taking a look at 5 lesser known N64 games that deserve your attention. And no, they aren't ranked in any kind of order, each of them brings something different to the table, so let's just jump straight into it. First up, we have
Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century!
Duck Dodgers starring Daffy Duck, a 3D platformer that's surprisingly solid. It's actually one of my favourite games on the system of the whole library. Released quite late in the life cycle of the N64 in 2000, this game lets you take control of the ever egotistical Daffy Duck, but in his alter ego, Duck Dodgers, of course, and he is battling up against Marvin the Martian's evil schemes across different planets. Think of it as a mix between Banjo-Kazooie and kind of Space Jam in a way. I suppose if Space Jam had laser guns and way more explosions. The game's levels are fun to explore with a mix of platforming, puzzle solving and combat. Daffy has a variety of wacky weapons at his disposal, and the game doesn't hold back on the Looney Tunes style humour. The controls can feel a bit stiff at times, but once you get used to them, Duck Dodgers is genuinely a fun ride. If you're a fan of the classic Warner Brothers cartoons and 3D platformers, this game is well worth checking out. The story here follows Duck Dodgers as he attempts to stop Marvin the Martian from using his ultimate weapon, the Infinitium Unstable Molecule, to take over the universe. Along the way, he must navigate a variety of intergalactic locations, face off against Marvin's robotic minions, and collect essential gadgets to thwart the evil Martian's plans. It's a comedic space adventure that stays true to the Looney Tunes formula when delivering engaging gameplay. Duck Dodgers controls similarly to other 3D platforms of the era, with players navigating large worlds split into smaller, not quite levels like Mario 64 jumping into paintings, but it's of that ilk. Each world has separate segments to it. You can typically go them in almost any order, and each one has its own kind of vibe and challenges to figure out. You have to collect atoms throughout the world. Once you get enough atoms, you either unlock further parts in that world, or you can unlock the boss fight and complete him and move on to the next planet. Throughout each individual world, you get different use of gadgets and ray guns to defeat enemies, all quite unique, and it actually makes the game very engaging because something fresh is always happening to you. It's not just your standard jumping and double jumping and hovering. There's a lot of different unique abilities that you pick up that are only used for kind of small challenges, but it really does keep the game fresh. While the controls do feel slightly sluggish compared to some more redefined platformers, they work well within the game's slapstick humour and exploratory-based gameplay. It's honestly a great game, and playing it now in emulation really removes the biggest fault that the game had on release, and that was the grainy, gritty visuals. In emulation, upscaling this really cleans up all the muddiness, and you see the smooth, cool, clear textures as intended, and it really does kind of feel like you're playing a cartoon. It's really, I'm very surprised that not more people talk about this game, especially when the N64 library is so small on big hitter games. Now let's talk about Body Harvest, one of the most ambitious games on the N64, developed by DMA Designs, who, yes, they later became Rockstar North, yes, they created Grand Theft Auto. This game came out before that, so just throw all that Rockstar Grand Theft Auto noise in the bin. This game is basically a mix of third-person exploration and combat shooting, as well as a alien invasion. It's very cool. You play as Adam Drake, a genetically engineered soldier sent back in time to stop the alien species from harvesting humanity. The game throws you into a massive open environment straight from the offset, and it doesn't really hold your hand in terms of what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go. It's kind of the first open world game that I can actually recall, especially being a kid and being like, what am I supposed to do in this huge world? Playing it today is a little bit more linear than I remember as a child, but it is a very fascinating game for the time period. You commandeer vehicles and take on side missions. Essentially, you just got to blow up and kill all the aliens. It's a bit like Earth Defense Force, but again, way before that game came out. Yes, it is a little bit rough around the edges. It is an N64 game, but for its time, Body Harvest is way ahead of the curve. Essentially, it kind of was like a prototype to the open world madness that GTA 3 became, but with aliens and weird space suits and laser beams and stuff. It's very cool. So yes, the story revolves around the alien race that has been systematically attacking Earth every 100 years to harvest humans as a food source. Adam Drake, the last hope of humanity, is sent back to key points in history. World War I, the 1940s, the 60s, and the future, to disrupt these attacks and eliminate the alien threat before they wipe out civilization. With each era presenting new challenges and weapons, the game keeps you engaged as you fight to rewrite history. Again, controls do feel of their time. Early third-person shooters didn't particularly work well, especially with the one analog stick, and combat does rely on an auto-aim system, but it does the job and it's not cumbersome, and you can play it and enjoy it. Again, driving vehicles, it plays a huge role in this game. Exploring is not just your cars, you've got jeeps, tanks, even boats, offering a variety of ways to traverse the expansive maps. The somewhat clunky controls do take a little bit of time to master, but again, they do work, and it kind of adds to the battles, making things feel a little bit more tense as you're trying to whiz around these slightly cumbersome controls. It's a really good game that just needed a little bit more polish and maybe a sequel, and it would have probably been, I'm not saying as big as Grand Theft Auto, but it could have been one of the biggest games on the system. Next on the list, we are looking at Tonic Trouble, a weird and colourful 3D platformer from Ubisoft. If it looks a little familiar, that's because it was made by the same team that made Rayman. Rayman? It was made by the same team behind Rayman. The game stars Ed, a janitor from space who accidentally spills a mysterious tonic onto Earth, mutating everything around him. That includes vegetables that now want to kill him. Yeah, it's that kind of weird, wacky game. The platforming is solid, the environments are creative, and the animations have that classic Ubisoft charm. It doesn't quite reach the heights of Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64, but it has a quirky personality and some fun level design that make it worth playing. If you like bizarre platformers with unique settings, Tonic Trouble is one to check out. The game's story follows Ed and his quest to retrieve the spilt tonic and undo the chaos that it unintentionally created. Typically, the villain is a mad scientist, and he seized control of the mutated world, using its new inhabitants to terrorize the land. So Ed must travel through various warped landscapes, fight against bizarre enemies, ultimately confront the mad scientist to restore order and save Earth from becoming a permanent mutated mess. Tonic Trouble features a control scheme that's similar to Rayman 2, as you would probably expect considering it came from the same studio. With fluid movement and jumping mechanics, Ed can run, jump, climb, and use various gadgets to interact with the environment. In some sections it does require some very precise platforming, and the controls do feel a little bit floaty at times. It does offer a rewarding challenge though, and it does kind of suit the surreal world the game is set in. You can kind of see why Rayman was more popular, but this game is definitely worth your time. Here we go with Space Station Silicon Valley, a puzzle platformer with a unique twist. You don't actually play as a traditional character. Instead, you take control of a microchip that can possess robotic animals to solve puzzles and complete the missions. The game's humour, clever mechanics, and creative level design make it one of the most unique experiences of the N64. The story follows Evo, a malfunctioning robot who crashes onto a long-lost space station, Silicon Valley. With his body destroyed, he must use microchips to take control of different robotic animals, each with its own abilities, to repair the station and stop its rogue AI from wreaking havoc. The game controls uniquely as each animal you possess has different movements and different attacking abilities. Some animals can fly, others can run fast, and some are better suited for combat. This constantly changing playstyle keeps the gameplay fresh, making each level a new puzzle to solve. It's quite interesting, definitely well worth your time. Go and give this one a look. And lastly here, but definitely not least, Robotron 64. This one, again, one of my favourite games that is underlooked, as this whole list kind of is about that, to be honest with you. But Robotron 64 is a fast-paced twin-stick shooter. It's all about chaotic arcade action. If you loved old-school, high-score chasing gameplay, this is the one. And yes, I did say twin-stick shooter, because this is one of the cool games, along with a few select others. Not many people realise you can play twin stick in GoldenEye 007, but Robotron 64 you can play two controllers, one player, move with one stick, shoot with the other on the same character. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. It does mention it in the manual, but again, who reads manuals? A lot of kids did back in the day, but not so much anymore, hey. Anyway, the game's story is very simple but effective. You play as a lone cyborg warrior, humanity's last hope against the army of evil robots. Your mission, of course, blast through waves and waves of enemies, save the remaining humans in the process. Robotron 64 is based on an arcade game. It's basically a sequel to an old arcade game, and as such, it really does play like your classic arcade shooter. Now, if you don't want to use two controllers to play as one person, you typically run around with your control stick, analog stick, and then use the C buttons to shoot in whichever direction you want to. It's very easy to understand and very smooth to play as. It's simple, it's intense, and it is incredibly fun, offering non-stop action that's easy to pick up, but very, very hard to master, just because of all the countless waves of enemies you have to fight, each with different abilities, different amounts of health, and it can get a bit of a cluster on the screen sometimes, but it's just such an awesome game. You're always on like one screen, 100 missions here, and it's just one screen you see. You're not going through corridors and round alleyways and through different buildings. You are top-down view, kill everything, save as many people as you can, and get to the boss. It's very, very difficult to get through the whole game, but it is one of the best games, at least for me, on the system, and it definitely should be spoken about a little bit more than it is. And there you have it, 5 lesser-known N64 games that are still a blast to play today. Whether you're into the platforming, the open world exploration, puzzle solving, or arcade action, there's pretty much something on this list for everybody. The N64 may be remembered for the legendary classics, but it does still have some hidden gems in 2025 that deserve just as much love now as they should have got back then, and actually probably didn't, to be honest with you. So there you go. Have I missed any of your favorites? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like button and of course the subscribe button, because I will be back next week with more gaming content. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.